On the night shift at a private airfield, you see some strange cargo, but you learn not to ask questions. You just sign the manifest, load the plane, and forget about it. A system that worked fine until the night a plane arrived carrying a box for me. It's a lonely gig, sitting in a glorified shed in the middle of nowhere, watching the hours crawl by. Most nights, the biggest excitement is a stray coyote trotting across the runway, its eyes glowing in the security lights. I'm Mark, I'm 45, and my life has been a series of compromises that led me to this: a cargo inspector at a desolate airfield in the backwoods of North America. It pays the bills, and more importantly, it requires minimal interaction with other human beings. That's the main selling point. I like the quiet. I like the routine. You check the paperwork, you check the seals, you sign off, and the plane disappears back into the ink-black sky. Simple, predictable, safe. That night started like any other. The air was cool and crisp, with a hint of rain that never quite materialized. The only sounds were the hum of the fluorescent lights in my small office and the distant rumble of a truck on the highway. Around 2 a.m., I heard it, a low, whining drone that wasn't on the schedule. We get unscheduled landings now and then. Usually some rich guy with more money than sense who needs to refuel his private jet. But this was different. The sound was wrong. It was a deep, guttural hum, like a giant insect gargling gravel. I stepped outside, my coffee cup warming my hands, and scanned the sky. There it was. A matte black aircraft, sleek and featureless, with no markings, no lights, nothing to identify it. It looked less like a plane and more like a void in the shape of one, cutting a silent, menacing path through the clouds. It landed with an eerie grace, its engines emitting a low thrum that vibrated in my chest. There was no radio chatter, no request for landing clearance. It just peered. My first instinct, the one honed by years of wanting to keep my head down and collect my paycheck, was to go back inside and pretend I hadn't seen it. But it taxied right up to my inspection station, its engines winding down with a sigh that sounded almost human. The cockpit canopy hissed open, and a figure emerged. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in a simple black flight suit that seemed to absorb the surrounding light. He didn't say a word, just descended the short ladder and walked towards me with a stiff, unnatural gait. His face was hidden in the shadow of his helmet, the visor a dark, impenetrable shield. He held out a tablet. I took it, my hand trembling slightly. On the screen was a single-item manifest. 1 refrigerated cargo unit, it read. Below that, the details. Dimensions 7 ft x 3 ft x 3 ft. Weight 250 pounds. Contents unspecified. But it wasn't the lack of information that made my blood run cold. It was the recipient information. Recipient Mark Sharp. Delivery address Hangar 4, Westwind Airfield. My name. My location. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. I looked up at the pilot, my voice barely a whisper. This is a mistake. He didn't respond. He just pointed a gloved finger at the signature line on the tablet. I felt a strange compulsion, a pressure in my head that urged me to just sign it, to not ask the questions that were screaming to be let out. So I did. My signature looked like a child's scrawl. The moment I lifted the stylus, the rear cargo ramp of the plane lowered with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a single, solitary object, a metal container, just as described, gleaming under the hangar lights. It looked like a high-tech coffin. The pilot gestured for me to come forward. 2 automated dollies rolled out from the plane, lifting the container and setting it gently on the tarmac. Then the pilot finally spoke. His voice was a distorted, electronic rasp, like a bad radio transmission. Guard it. Do not open it. Do not leave its side. A handler will arrive at dawn. You will be compensated. Before I could protest, before I could ask what the hell was going on, he turned and walked back to the plane. The ramp retracted, the canopy closed, and with that same unsettling, low hum, the aircraft lifted off the ground and vanished into the night sky, leaving me alone on the tarmac with a 7-foot refrigerated box addressed to me. I stood there for a long time, the silence of the airfield pressing in on me, the cold metal of the container seeming to radiate a palpable sense of dread. My system, the one that had worked for so long, had just been shattered. And as the first hour of my long watch began, I had a sinking feeling that I wouldn't be forgetting about this particular piece of cargo anytime soon. The first hour was the worst. The silence was a physical weight, broken only by the low, steady hum of the container's cooling unit. I dragged it into Hangar 4, a cavernous, dusty space filled with old, forgotten equipment and the ghosts of planes that had long since been scrapped. The big rolling doors groaned shut, sealing me inside. Me and the box. I walked around it, my footsteps echoing in the vast space. It was impeccably made, not a single seam or rivet visible. Just smooth, cold gray metal. I put my hand on it, half expecting to feel something, but there was just a faint vibration from the machinery inside. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Was this a prank? A threat? A mistake of cosmic proportions? I thought about calling my boss, a perpetually annoyed man named Henderson who probably wouldn't even answer his phone at this hour. What would I even tell him? Yeah, hi, a ghost plane dropped off a mystery box with my name on it, and a robot-voiced pilot told me to babysit it. I'd be fired before I finished the sentence. I thought about calling the police, but the same problem arose. The plane was gone. There was no evidence of anything unusual other than a 7-foot metal box that looked expensive and a manifest that now only existed on a tablet that had disappeared with a pilot. They'd think I was drunk or crazy. So I did what I was told. I waited. I made a pot of coffee in the hangar's small, grimy office, my eyes never leaving the container. I tried to read a book, but the words swam in front of my eyes. Every creak of the old hangar, every gust of wind against the metal siding, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I was a prisoner, trapped by a set of instructions I didn't understand and a fear that was growing with every passing minute. That's when the thumping started. It was faint at first, so faint I thought I was imagining it. A low, rhythmic thump 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 coming from inside the container. It was slow, steady, like a heartbeat, but it was too deep, too heavy for a human heart. I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. I listened, holding my breath. There it was again. Thump thump thump. It was real. Something inside that box was moving. Something human-sized. My training, my instincts, every rational thought in my head screamed at me to get away. Leave the hangar, get in my car, and drive until I hit the ocean. But the pilot's words echoed in my mind. Guard it. A handler will arrive at dawn. What would happen if I left? What was the compensation? And more importantly, what was the penalty for failure? This wasn't some random shipment. It had my name on it. They knew who I was. They knew where I was. Running felt like a death sentence. The thumping continued, a constant, maddening drumbeat against the silence. It seemed to be getting stronger, more insistent. I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my temple. I grabbed a heavy wrench from a nearby toolbox, my knuckles white. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it made me feel slightly less helpless. I circled the container again, the wrench held tight in my hand. "Who's in there?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. The only answer was the relentless thump thump thump. Then my phone rang. The sudden, jarring sound made me jump, the wrench clattering to the concrete floor. I fumbled for my phone, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked at the screen, and the blood drained from my face. The caller ID showed my own name, my own number. I stared at it, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. It had to be a glitch, a malfunction. I swiped to answer, my hand shaking uncontrollably. "Hello," I said, my voice cracking. The line was filled with static, a roaring, oceanic sound, and underneath it a voice. It was my voice, but it was wrong. It was distorted, stretched, and layered, as if a dozen versions of me were speaking at once, all of them in agony. "Don't open it," the chorus of my own voices rasped through the static. "Don't let it out." I dropped the phone. It clattered on the floor, the screen cracking. The distorted voice continued to emanate from the small speaker, a babble of garbled, terrifying warnings. "It wants you, it knows you." I kicked the phone away, sending it skittering across the hangar floor until it slammed into the far wall and fell silent. I backed away, pressing myself against the cold, corrugated metal of the hangar wall, my eyes wide with terror. The thumping from the container seemed to mock me, its rhythm a steady counterpoint to the frantic hammering of my own heart. The box, the phone call, my name, it was all connected. This wasn't just cargo. It was a message, a trap, and I was caught right in the middle of it. The sun was still hours from rising, and the thought of what else this night held in store for me was a horror I couldn't begin to comprehend. The hours between that phone call and the first hint of dawn were the longest of my life. The hangar, once a place of boring solitude, had transformed into my own personal torture chamber. The thumping inside the container had stopped, which was somehow even more terrifying. The silence it left behind was heavy, expectant. I kept staring at the box, imagining what was happening inside. Was it resting? Was it waiting? Was it listening to me just as I was listening for it? My mind, fueled by caffeine and pure, undiluted fear, started to play tricks on me. I saw movement in the shadows, heard whispers that were just the wind. I kept glancing at my shattered phone, half expecting it to light up again with another call from myself. I thought about my life, a pathetic parade of missed opportunities and quiet desperation. A failed marriage, a daughter who lived on the other side of the country and barely spoke to me, a job that was a slow, soul-crushing march towards oblivion. Was this some kind of cosmic punishment? Had I finally done something to deserve more than just quiet misery? I was at my lowest point, backed into a corner by a fear so profound it felt like it was rewriting my DNA. I was no longer just Mark Sharp, cynical cargo inspector. I was a cornered animal, oscillating between paralysis and a frantic desire to fight back. The pilot's instructions warred with my own survival instinct. Guard it. Do not open it. But the voice on the phone, my voice had said, don't let it out. Did that mean opening it would release it? Or was the warning about something else entirely? The urge to know became an obsession. The fear of the unknown was slowly being overshadowed by the terror of what was already happening to me. My sanity was fraying, my reality was twisting into a nightmare. What could possibly be in that box that was worse than this? Waiting for the handler felt like waiting for my own executioner. At least if I opened the box, I would see my killer's face. I would have some semblance of control. I would have an answer. That's when I remembered the crowbar. It was in the emergency kit on the other side of the hangar. A 3-foot piece of solid steel. My hands closed around its cool, painted surface, and for the first time in hours, I felt a flicker of something other than fear. It was a grim resolve. I was done being a passive victim. I was done waiting. I was going to get an answer. I walked back to the container, the crowbar feeling heavy and purposeful in my grip. The hum of the refrigeration unit was the only sound. I took a deep breath, the cold, dusty air filling my lungs. I examined the container's surface again, looking for a latch, a seam, a weak point. There was a thin, almost invisible line running along the top edge. A seal. I wedged the tip of the crowbar into the seam and pushed. Nothing. The metal was solid, unyielding. I put my whole body into it, grunting with the effort. My muscles screamed in protest. The crowbar bent slightly under the strain, the metal groaning. For a moment, I thought it was hopeless. Then, with a sudden, deafening crack, the seal broke. A wave of frigid air washed over me, smelling of ozone and something else, something vaguely organic and metallic, like old blood. A thick, white vapor billowed out, obscuring my view. I stumbled back, coughing, my heart hammering against my ribs. The lid of the container, now unsealed, lifted slowly, pushed from within by some unseen force. It rose about a foot and then stopped. I stood there, paralyzed, the crowbar held in front of me like a useless talisman. The vapor swirled, slowly dissipating. I could see something inside, a shape in the darkness. It was a human form, pale and still. I took a hesitant step closer, peering into the icy mist. And then I saw the face. The eyes were closed, the skin waxy and unnaturally smooth. The hair was my hair. The nose was my nose. The thin, cynical line of the mouth was my mouth. It was me. A perfect, flawless copy of myself, lying there as if asleep. But it wasn't just a look-alike. I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that this was me. Another me. I stared, my mind reeling, trying to comprehend the impossibility of what I was seeing. 1,000 questions flooded my brain, but one screamed louder than all the others: if he's in there, then who the hell am I? Before I could even begin to process the horror of that thought, the eyes of the man in the box snapped open. They weren't my eyes. They were completely black, devoid of iris or pupil, two bottomless pits of pure darkness. And they were staring right at me. A slow, cruel smile spread across my face. Then, from the depths of the container, a hand reached out, not towards me, but towards the inside of the lid, and with a single, deliberate tap, the rhythmic thumping began again. Thump, 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 but this time, I was looking right at the source. And it was just getting started. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat, a choked, silent gasp. My body was frozen, but my mind was a vortex of pure, undiluted panic. The thing in the box, the other me, kept its black eyes locked on mine, that terrible, knowing smile never leaving its lips. Its hand continued to tap against the inside of the lid, a casual, patient rhythm that was 1,000 times more terrifying than the frantic thumping from before. It was a countdown, a promise. My instincts finally kicked in. I scrambled backward, tripping over my own feet and landing hard on the concrete floor. The crowbar flew from my grasp, skittering into the darkness. I crab walked away, my eyes never leaving the container, the figure inside a pale, horrifying silhouette against the swirling vapor. It made no move to get out. It just watched me, smiled, tapped. I had to close it. I had to get the lid back on. The distorted voice from my phone echoed in my head, "Don't let it out." It wasn't a warning about opening the box. It was a plea. Pushing myself to my feet, I lunged for the lid. My hands touched the freezing metal, the cold, a searing pain. I threw my entire weight against it, trying to force it shut. It was like trying to move a mountain. The resistance was immense, an unseen, immovable force pushing back from within. I grunted, my muscles straining, my vision starting to blur at the edges. For a terrifying second, I felt the lid begin to rise again, and I saw the thing's smile widen. Then, the pressure vanished. The lid slammed shut with a concussive boom that echoed through the hangar like a gunshot. I fell forward onto the container, my chest heaving, my body trembling with exhaustion and terror. The tapping stopped. The silence was absolute. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, my ear pressed against the cold metal, listening for any sound, any sign of movement. There was nothing. Just the gentle hum of the refrigeration unit doing its job. Slowly, shakily, I got to my feet. My legs felt like jelly. I looked around the hangar, my eyes darting into the shadows. I was alone again. But not really. I would never be alone again. I knew what was in the box now. Or rather, who. And that knowledge was a poison that would stay with me forever. As the first faint rays of dawn began to filter through the hangar's grimy windows, I heard the sound of a car approaching. Headlights cut through the darkness, sweeping across the hangar doors. A black sedan, as featureless as the plane, rolled to a stop outside. The engine cut and a man got out. He was impeccably dressed in a sharp, dark suit, his face calm and emotionless. He looked like a government agent or a funeral director. He walked into the hangar, his expensive shoes clicking on the concrete. He didn't seem surprised to see me or the state I was in. His eyes went straight to the container, a brief flicker of, what? Approval? I couldn't tell. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice smooth and professional, with no trace of the electronic distortion of the pilot's. I just stared at him, unable to form words. I gestured weakly at the container. "What is it?" I finally managed to croak. "What's in there?" He gave me a thin, professional smile. "You followed your instructions. That's all that matters. You weren't supposed to open it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Your compensation." He placed it on a nearby crate. "I want answers," I said, my voice gaining a bit of strength. "Who are you? What was that thing? It had my face." The handler's smile didn't waver. "Sometimes there are errors in the system. Glitches. Loose ends that need to be collected and archived. You were just a delivery point, Mr. Sharp. A necessary part of the process. The less you know, the better." He nodded towards the envelope. "Take the money. Go home. Forget this ever happened. Your shift is over." Two more men, dressed in a similar fashion, emerged from the car and efficiently loaded the refrigerated container into the back of a waiting truck I hadn't even noticed pull up. They worked in complete silence, their movements precise and practiced. As they secured the container, the handler turned to leave. "Wait," I called out, my voice desperate. "The thing in the box, was it me? Another me?" He paused at the hangar door and looked back, his expression unreadable in the dim morning light. "Which one of you do you think made the call?" he asked, his voice soft. And with that, he was gone. The truck and the sedan drove off, leaving me alone in the hangar as the sun finally rose. The envelope sat on the crate, a stark white rectangle in the morning light. I never opened it. I left it there, along with the crowbar, my shattered phone, and the last remnants of my sanity. I walked out of that hangar and never looked back. I quit my job that morning, telling Henderson I was sick, that I was moving away. I didn't care. I just had to leave. I've been on the road ever since, drifting from one town to the next, staying in cheap motels, always paying in cash. I can't stay in one place for too long. I'm afraid they'll find me. Or worse, that they'll send another delivery. Sometimes, late at night, when the silence gets too loud, I think about that thing in the box. The thing with my face and those black, empty eyes. And I wonder, was I the glitch they were collecting? Or was he? Which one of us was the original, and which one was the copy that got away? I check my reflection every day, searching my own eyes for any sign of darkness. And every time my phone rings with an unknown number, I feel a jolt of pure, cold terror, because I know that one day it might be me on the other end of the line, calling to warn some other poor soul not to let me out. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like. We appreciate everyone and can't wait to bring more stories your way.